Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of What the Tech is Product Management. This time, I have the pleasure of inviting Mr. Diaz. He and I go a long way back. No, I'm just kidding. So, we knew each other for a couple of years now. I was fortunate enough to bump into him when I was working at Walmart Connect offsite team. And Mr. Diaz is a CEO of Jivox, which is like a premium technology. But without further ado, we'll get a sense for Diaz's journey a little bit more today, and we'll get a sense for his take on product management. Hey, Diaz, thanks for taking the time to join us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Nishant, for welcoming me to the podcast.
Diaz, like, without any delay, I would love to give everyone a sense for your journey. So, if you could start off from your days in BITS to all the way till Jivox, a couple of quick minutes, that will be really helpful.
Sure. Happy to do that. Yeah. So from BITS, I worked for a little bit in India and then came to the US to work for a very large
Mm.
company called Unisys. And I quickly realized that maybe I didn't belong in a very large company. So, like many entrepreneurs that come or many engineers that come to the US, it was about, Bill Gates and Larry Ellison and all the big success in Silicon Valley. So within a year of being at Unisys, I got the bug to start something on my own. And one of my coworkers and his roommate, the three of us got together and rented a nice beach home. I don't know why a beach home would have been good to start a company, but anyway, that's what we did. And next thing you know, it was in kind of a garage, if you have to use that typical
So you
setting.
had the beat, right?
Uh,
If nothing
s-
else
uh,
goes right, you had
exactly, yeah. It was a garage and a beach, so I guess maybe a slightly
the.
luxury version of a garage. But yeah, that's how we started Informatica. That was in LA or Southern California, and then we shifted the company because when we got our funding, our VCs were over here. We thought it'd be easier. And then from then on, Informatica was a great ride. I guess the first one being a great, phenomenal success creates a problem because now you have to try to replicate that. And but that was great. We went public in '99, and then a couple of years later, Informatica had become a pretty big company. And as I said earlier, I felt like I'm not a big company guy necessarily, so got the bug again, and then started Celequest. This time I was sort of the sole founder, and that company exited 5 years into it to Cognos, a big business intelligence software company in Canada, and then after that, about a year later, I
Interesting.
started Jivox.
So everything I knew about you over the last couple of years has been about adtech. So I've never imagined you being from Informatica and Cognos, right? Yeah, what prompted you to shift? Maybe like let's go back in time, right? So let's start off with Informatica. I'd be curious, like, how did you know there was a problem to be solved for? Because I'm sure just like today, 20 years ago, the same thing was happening. Analytics is the thing, right? Now, future, in the past. So, how did you know that there was a gap in the market when you were going after Informatica?
Well, like most startups, it's a little bit like an iterative
Hmm.
process of discovery, right? And whether you call it pivots or whatever, we actually at that time I was seeing this kind of shift from and I'm going to date myself here because when I talk about mini computers, even you might wonder what a mini computer is, but at that time it was people going from the big giant mainframe computers to mini computers. Oracle was a very young startup and so on. So we figured there would be an opportunity to migrate applications and data from the big mainframes to mini computers onto systems like Oracle and so on. So it's meant to be a kind of a one-off migration effort. We could quickly realize there wasn't much money there and it was more of a services business. And then essentially saw the opportunity for data warehousing, which again was kind of a
Yeah.
new term at that time. So we kind of latched onto that and, found a business model which was more repeatable, scalable, and kind of a continuous process versus data migration, which was a one-time thing. And after that, there was no use for the software. So, yeah, kind of an interesting early pivot. And luckily, we pivoted to the right thing
Awesome.
and took off from
And
there.
if I'm not wrong, Jivox is at least the third most successful entrepreneurship in your lifetime. So if you were to go back and try and zoom out and look at like what were some of the common patterns as you persisted through these journeys, I'd be curious like what made you a successful entrepreneur?
I think, well, first off, you have to kind of want to do it. And I say that because, entrepreneur, a lot of people see the glory
Yeah.
side of entrepreneurship. Like I guess when you're very successful and you're famous, it looks pretty easy, but you have to have a little bit of a ability to sort of go through the ups and downs of startup life. And all three of them we had kind of, Informatica, we ran out of money completely. And I was using my credit cards to pay our early employees. And then we got our financing, and then the rest, as they say, is history. But like every company has had its ups and downs. So the ability to sort of say, hey, I'm willing to take the risk. Yeah, I know it's not going to work out, but even if I used to tell people that I hired early, and even now into at the startup stage, saying I can't guarantee it's going to be a success, but I can guarantee it will be a lot of fun, right? And that's kind of how I've approached it in general. Is like, it's very very hard to even have one success, and having more than one is pushing your luck. But they're all fun, and I've enjoyed every single one of them. So I say to people, if you're willing to take the risk, realize that you could fail at it, and look forward to having some
Wow.
fun.
No,
Do
that's
it.
I keep wondering, right? So I know the energy also changes with age, right? Like when you're in 20s, you're like ready to conquer the world, but as you grow a little bit wiser, older, what's the point, right? So I'm curious, like, I mean, the joy, did it help that you saw your first success early on? Was that like a momentum builder for you? Or did you feel like you would have had the same kind of approach if you had any failures along the way?
That's a very good question. I think without a doubt, the first success did inspire me. Although even within that first success, the first couple of ideas in
Mm.
Informatica actually failed. As I said,
Yeah,
we
you had to
ran out
persist,
of
right?
money.
Yeah.
So if I were to give up, I
Yeah.
would have given up right then and there. So I guess it's something about, not so much inspired by my first success, but inspired by other entrepreneurs, right? And saying, hey, there's all these entrepreneurs trying and failing and succeeding sometimes. So, why not, right?
No,
Keep
I'm
trying
glad
things.
you did right because you can continue to be an inspiration for the next generation of folks like us. So I'm fortunate to have known you, and it's also inspiring to see people launch something, be good at it, and then also have the courage to move out of it and then start something new from fresh. That just feels like insane. Uh, so yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, and yeah, you were asking also about sort of the, I guess, age, meaning, for your first startup, maybe you're very young and very foolish and actually don't even know the risks ahead. So there's a little bit of that, to be fair, that you sort of jump into something without worrying about anything. At that time, when I started Informatica, I was single and very young, and probably foolish too. Like I didn't really know, and certainly didn't imagine Informatica would be the success that it ended up being. So there's definitely that, but I do think that, you know, while the first startup may be one driven by that sort of just, you have a lot of time, a lot of energy, and maybe not that many responsibilities. Plus, if you fail, what's the worst that could happen, right? Like you have nothing to lose. As you get older, you have more to lose and you have less time. But I do think you also feel like you've made mistakes along the way and kind of know at least some of the landmines and what not to trip up over. So maybe there's a little bit more confidence that you can do it better as you get older. So it's a little bit like, you do get a little more fearful because you've seen how bad it can get, but you also feel, hey, I've done this before. I know what to do, and some of that wisdom
Yes. A
does
little
carry
more
forward.
stake in the ground, but also a little more wiser and confident that okay, you know how to get out of things, right? That's great. Also, like before we move on to the main topic of product, I just want to take some more time on the alumni part of it. So, how were you able to tap into the BITS IIT ecosystem when you were kicking off your entrepreneurial journey? Like, yeah, just curious, like, how does it help to be part of like such a premier institute, and how are those resources coming handy?
Yeah, I have to say, I didn't tap into it that much in my first two companies, primarily because they were both those companies were almost all entirely located here in the U.S. So we didn't really have. I mean, Informatica, about the time I was leaving, we did set up a team in India and start doing some engineering work there. Celequest, we didn't really at all. Whereas Jivox, we started with the model of doing our engineering at least, and maybe other functions in India. So the opportunity was significantly more at Jivox. So when we started building our team, and after it had gotten to some critical mass, I thought, hey, why not partner with BITS and tap into some of the great talent there. And today, every year we bring on anywhere from 5 to 7 engineers, and then even in our product management team, there's quite a bit of influence of bits, and it became easier and more possible because we had a team in
Awesome.
Bangalore.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I feel like, I mean, to your point, in the past, the Indian ecosystem primarily meant engineers, but in the recent past, there's a lot more entrepreneurial spirit, a lot more product management, product marketing kind of spirit. So I feel like that trend is up and coming. So,
Exactly. No, it's a good point you're bringing up. I think if I look back, even within Jivox, like in our early days, we had a lot of trouble hiring anything other than engineers. In fact,
mm,
management was very difficult. Uh, Product management was impossible; it simply didn't exist. And product marketing, and
sure,
other kind of business functions. But if you fast forward to where we are now, we actually hire a significant number of engineering, of course, but also product management, product marketing, pretty much every business function. And I think it just reflects the maturity of the college education in India, more liberal arts education, more management. The business schools have evolved quite a bit. Some phenomenal talent there now, over and above just the raw engineering talent that
of course.
India always had.
So when we talk about, so maybe let's now zoom in on Jivox's journey in Pacific Diaz. Um, so when did you first get your product out? I'm just curious, like, I mean, for a startup of your size, how do you view your product team? Like, at what point of the journey are you hiring a product team versus you are the product in the beginning? And any unique thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I've observed, certainly in the three companies that I founded, is that product management, at least initially, is driven by the founder or founders, right? Because they're usually product folks or engineers or whatever. So they're doing everything, right? They're doing sales, they're doing whatever. And I do believe that in the early days when you're trying to figure out product market fit, there has to be a very tight closed loop between initial customer acquisition and feedback to the product. And that could be life or death for the startup, right? Because if you don't get product market fit quickly, you could be in trouble pretty quickly. So I think the founder's role, in fact, I think at Jivox, we didn't have product management until much, much later, and I have this sort of theory about, say, 10 million ARR is sort of the magical number. Hopefully before that, but if you go past that without a robust product management team, I think the company may just may just stall there and maybe even reverse backwards, right? Because at that size, the founder ends up being pulled into so much of other business functions that have matured: sales, marketing, finance, HR, all the things that a CEO has to be responsible for. And so the discipline of product management, I think, is very crucial as the company reaches that scale phase. And without that, most companies just don't seem to be able to scale until they have that function well established. The other thing that I've been intrigued by recently is all the discussion around founder mode, right? And I think my thought on that is that even when a company is cross 10 million or whatever, wherever you are, there are times when you have to make some small
Mm-hmm.
pivots, or sometimes big pivots, right? And that's when the founder has to be more involved in product management, right? Because you're sort of going back to that startup phase and saying, hey, how do we find product market fit for this new product? And so you sort of go back to the pre 10 million ARR phase, and or if you're introducing a new product or going after a new market. In fact, we at Jivox did exactly that about 2 years ago, and we started working on our retail media product because and I got very involved in driving that. But now we've got quite a bit of traction and growth in that part of the market. I'm kind of backing off and letting the PM team take it over. So it's a bit of a cycle of
Okay.
how early is your product? Have you got market fit? And then once you have, you want to scale up product
Awesome.
management as well.
That's actually pretty insightful. You're saying that when the uncertainty is big, the founders need to get their hand dirty. But then, as in when it starts shaping up pretty strongly, then you move on to the more important stuff, like maybe sales or deal making or representing the brand across various portfolios, right? So makes sense.
Yeah, it's not so much move
Mm-hmm.
away from product. Oh, in my views, I think CEO and founders
Mm-hmm.
have to still be involved. But I find that my role becomes more around
Gotcha.
product strategy
Mm-hmm.
and vision
Oh yes.
versus at a feature level. Do we do this, do that, or whatever? So I think there's still kind of the guiding principle or guiding, because directionally the company may
Okay.
make some shifts, right? You might go from SMB to enterprise. You may go, geographically kind of expand. So there may be, and these are not necessarily pivots; they're just sort of growth pivots, if you will. So it's important, I think, for the CEO and founder to be involved at that strategic level, providing
Sure.
guidance and input to the product management team. Ideally, they shouldn't be the one trying to design every feature and kind of, work at that kind of
Makes sense.
tactical
Makes
level.
sense. And again, going back to Jivox, like you mentioned that initially you were the primary PM. At what point did you bring them in, like bring your first product manager in? And thinking of companies of the size of Jivox, when you hired your first PM, what are the kinds of skill sets you're looking for? I'm sure like it can't be beginners anymore because you need someone who's able to steer the ship in a pretty strong way. So curious, like what were you looking for at that point, and how did you go about your first hire?
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember. I think we started building our product management. We were probably about
Okay.
$7 million ARR, something like that, because I felt like it was important to have that function. And what we did, interestingly enough, was you're right in that if I look back at Informatica and so on, I actually hired product managers who were more experienced and had done some level of product management before. But what we ended up doing at Jivox was just sort of, hired
Oh,
fresh out of school, out of business school, you know, and and it worked out quite well, actually. Well, so let me take that back. So we did actually hire first, I think, one or two PMs from right out of business school. That worked well, but it was a little challenging because it meant I had to still pretty much be involved in sort of mentoring, coaching, and I think the long distance thing kind of was a little challenging to the time zone and so on. And then, when we made some changes, what we did was actually brought one of our team members that was more customer facing. She was
Okay.
actually working on customer success and worked with some of our biggest customers and so on. Strong technical background, business background, etc. So we said, hey, maybe if we bring someone who knows our business well, because when you bring someone right out of school, they may be very smart, very bright, but they have a big learning curve, not only about the market but our product and so on. Um, we did that. That worked out very well. And what we did was the other product managers we hired
Was
were
it
all out of school,
got it, got it.
right? Fresh out of school. That model has worked out very, very well because now we've got the institutional knowledge, and our head of product management, she's worked, in customer facing roles, kind of knows how customers use the product and what they look for, whatever. But we also got some really phenomenal talent right out of school that allowed us to build a good sized product management team.
Actually, that
Right.
feels very intuitive now that you mention it, because on one end you need someone who understands the customers and the Jivox world well, but at the same time it might be worthwhile pairing them up with someone who's like able to take like a naked view on this problem, because they have strong product skills. They're asking the right questions, but you shouldn't have to waste time on bringing up to speed on everything that happened within the ad tech for the last decade or so, right?
Exactly. And, I always tell people product management is probably one of the hardest roles to hire into. And also the one where if you make mistakes, it could be, you know, severe. And often the impact of it isn't felt immediately. So it's not like sales or other functions where, if something isn't working out, quite immediately. I think in product management, could be a year or two before you realize that, what needs to happen isn't quite happening, or the vision is, not going the right direction, or the usability and other things that take time to build and see the impact of. So I do, recommend to founders and CEOs pay a lot of attention to product management, especially as you step away, because the product can lose its direction very, very quickly unless you hire, mentor, and train a really strong
Yeah,
product
actually,
management
that's
team.
true, right? If you're saying product managers help you scale, it could be in either direction. If you don't course correct it, you're probably heading in the wrong direction, and then it takes a lot more time.
You could gear up somewhere
Yeah,
else fairly quickly because the engineering team is taking all their input from what the product manager is saying and so on and so forth. So if they're not aligned with the vision, or they're talking to the wrong type of customer, or they haven't kind of understood the ideal customer profile and all of that, it's potential for it to go off in the wrong
yeah.
direction
I
is
don't know
quite
how
high.
things are at Jivox, but when I work for large companies and I take on new products that were handled by a different product, or like did not have a product manager before me, it takes a lot of time to undo the damage that has been done before, mainly from a cultural perspective, because everyone was committed from a passion and time perspective in a certain direction. And now that to convince them that, okay, that may not be the best idea and they have to pivot, it's like a matter of, okay, let's just get time, but also the emotion to shift things, right? So I don't know, maybe at your work, it might be significant.
Yeah, no, no, yeah, absolutely true. And so one of the things that I did was, and this was something actually I
Mhm.
did when I was at Informatica, is put together a kind of I think it's like a 10 slide
Okay.
onboarding deck for product managers, because I mean, product management until recently wasn't taught very well in even in some of the best business schools, right? So you have somebody with good technical skills, good business skills, but with no understanding what product management really is, you know. And after a lot of mishaps and just sort of thinking it through, I said, okay, as part of onboarding a product manager or building a team, let's lay out very clearly how the process should work, right? And you're almost sort of teaching someone with very smart, great business skills, great technical skills, how to build a product, right? And so that helped. I think having that framework and kind of ways of working well understood and followed, I think it helps, because otherwise you're sort of dependent on product managers who either don't completely understand product management or come from other companies who have very different product management cultures, right? And so you sort of end up with this mishmash of approaches, which often doesn't work out very well. So taking a little bit of time, saying, "Hey, here's the process. Here's how we get our inputs." I always tell product managers, don't talk about features, talk about requirements, right? Like, tell me what the customer is trying to
Mhm.
accomplish first and foremost, and then translate it into features. Things like that. They sound pretty basic, but I've been surprised by you know uh, how little training or knowledge there is out there for product managers to be able to understand how
It's
to
a
do it.
pretty good segue to the next topic. Like, I'm curious, like, how do you think about, I don't want to call them bad and good, right? Like, let's say like good and differentiating product managers, great product managers. What is it? Some of the good ones in your experience get it right, and how do you look out for them when you're hiring?
Yeah. So while hiring, and in fact, I just this last week did a whole slew of interviews for a new batch of product managers. I try to find people who are inquisitive, right? So I want them to ask me as many questions as I ask them, and I'll usually give them the opportunity to do that. And if they're like, "Oh no, I'm good," then I'm like, "Okay, you're not good because you don't have that curiosity about wanting to learn about what a customer is trying to do or what's happening in the market, things like that." So I think curiosity, intellectual curiosity is critical. The second is collaboration skills, right? Because product management is can be a frustrating job. You have all the responsibility but no power, right? Really, like product managers don't manage the engineers. It's not like you can make the engineers do something or not, and yet the CEO expects you to deliver a great product, right? So you do it through influence, right? And you do it through knowledge and respect. So people with good collaborative skills can say, "Hey, I've talked to the customer, and I have here's my understanding of what they're trying to do." And engineers want to build a great product, right? So they're more likely to listen to you if you take that collaborative approach. I've had some bad experiences with product managers who, especially ones with strong engineering backgrounds or who came from engineering, who are like, "Oh, I know how to. You should do it this way," or try to design the product, or and then there's friction with engineering and stuff. So I think collaborative skills are are quite important. And thirdly, and this comes a little later. Unfortunately, it's hard to determine that, and when you're hiring them, is how much they enjoy talking to customers, right? Because I think I always tell my product managers, they're always like, "Hey, you always seem to know what customers are doing." I say, "Well, because I talk to them all the time, right? I wasn't born with any particular product management genes in my brain. It's just that I speak to two, three, four customers a week, right? Either because I'm pitching to them or because I'm talking to our existing customers. So the more I like to hear that they both enjoy talking to customers or they have been doing that in the past, and I think that's the other thing I
Understand.
look forward to.
And again, given Jivox's stage, would you still be looking for people with ad tech, for example, experience, or are you okay with generalists who have had good experience in other places?
Actually, I have a bit
Hmm.
of a contrarian view there. I don't usually place
Oh,
too
nice.
much
Okay.
value on experience. Uh, the reason is because I think, and it's true, especially now, even
Hmm.
compared to when I started Informatica, right? When I started Informatica, things weren't changing that rapidly or, evolving. You could sort of, we used to have these long product cycles where it took a year to get a new release out, the old
Yeah.
waterfall methods. Because things were moving that fast, right? You fast forward to where we are now,
Hmm.
and especially in ad tech, right? you blink and you miss an entire,
Yeah.
generation of ad tech. So, it's nice to have people who understand it a little bit or have been exposed to marketing or something like that. So they have a quicker, ramp up. But honestly, like, let's think about this, right? You look at advertising, right? 3 years ago, Gen AI didn't exist. I mean, I still remember, actually, it was in 2022, I think, earlier in the year. I put up this slide deck in front of our management team. And on the beginning slide, I had a picture of a guy
Uh,
staring into space. And I said, what's special about this image? And everybody's looking at me saying, and I said it was generated by AI. This was 3 years ago. And then even at that time, I didn't think, I thought, oh, that's cool that AI can generate an image.
yeah,
But you
it's
look at where
insane.
it is now, right? In 3 years, it's
Right.
completely transformed marketing, right? So that speed and velocity at which new ideas and things are coming in and out of not just ad tech, but pretty much any kind of tech, means that you're better off having a PM team and even an engineering team that doesn't necessarily have a lot of experience. In fact, if you have a lot of experience, you may have the wrong kind of experience. If you came in thinking that ads have to be built manually one at a time, and that was your experience, then well, then good luck trying to adopt to Gen AI and technologies like that. So not to say, I mean, gosh, of all people, I should be saying experience is useless, right? But but I do think that there's some virtue in bringing just raw talent and raw skills and that hunger for information and inquisitive mind and stuff into the mix. Yes, you might have a few people that know ad tech really well because that is our business, but I think we benefit a lot from bringing the raw talent too because they come up with new ideas. In fact, our entire Gen AI
Totally.
team is brand new. Like, yeah, engineers from the best engineering schools in India, and we do have, our labs head Taran is amazing. He's been in the
Hmm.
company for a while. He's managing that team, but even he will tell you that a lot of that the innovations that we've been able to come up with has been because we brought in this raw talent. They were not ad tech people. They don't know anything about ad tech. In fact, this is a good thing, right? They weren't didn't have any baggage
Yeah.
about how to do it. We just said, hey, here's a problem. Go figure out a way to solve it using Gen AI. And I've been shocked. Like just to give you an anecdote, just from a few weeks ago, I was talking to some customers. They were talking about this issue of creative compliance, right?
Yeah.
Which, as you know, in retail media is a big issue. So I called our the head of our labs team, Tarn, and I said, hey, Tarn, I was just talking to all these customers. They're all asking me, what if somebody just brings a piece of creative that they built and said it complies with your specs as a retailer, run it, and you're like, wait, no, I gotta have somebody check it out. Um, I said, can you do something with Gen AI and do. And several weeks later, they showed me a prototype, which just blew me away, which was using Gen AI to actually feed it creative specs, and it flags all the problems that there are with the creative that you fed it. I was like, oh my goodness, right? So again, this the team that sort of put the LLM together where it didn't. They're not ad tech people. In fact, if they were ad tech people, they would have said it's impossible,
I know.
right?
So, like as you know, like we're also solving something similar right, at our place, and it's always the ad tech folks, the creative folks who are like, I don't think Gen AI can do what we do. And it's so difficult to have this conversation that we don't need Gen AI to do exactly what you're doing. So there's like a lot of value to be unlocked at even like that 60, 70, 80% value that you guys typically bring to the table, right? And I think not being from ad tech in some cases and not being from like anything to do with the space that the end user is solving the problem for is going to be so meaningful when we're solving it. It's almost like giving a kid to solve a problem versus we trying to solve the problem, right? So when we solve it, we already have the mental model set and we are operating a certain way. But a kid is going to just break it and then get the genie out of the lamp, right? So
Right. They're gonna challenge you and say, or they're gonna show you something where you're like,
yeah.
oh my god, I didn't even think about that. But I
Mm,
do think, having said that, obviously the experience there helps because those of us that, when we talk to creative teams and stuff, we know how picky they are and
Yeah.
should be because they're protecting the brand. You can't willy nilly, generate stuff and push it out there. And there's issues with liability. There's issues with gender
Right.
equality and all. I mean, so it's not
Sure.
it can't be the Wild West, but I don't think it's, at least the way I think of it, it isn't all about experience. In fact, experience is one facet of value in a product manager, but just raw talent and an inquisitive mind and someone who's open minded and willing to sort of try things and break things
It
if
actually is
needed
so
is a big
refreshing,
thing.
actually, in the sense that I think the product management as a function is currently being trained to look for overlaps as much as possible. And I think it takes a very zoomed in approach of, okay, how quickly can I get value out of a given hire? And that is always going to be a factor of, find people who have done this before and it's going to be the most meaningful for your product. But when you zoom out, it's always the people who are able to hustle and like question the status quo and break things and look at the bigger picture. And then you start all of a sudden optimizing for different things. It's like your experience matters, but not necessarily in the exact problem that I'm trying to solve for, because the problem is going to change in a few months, and I need you to be able to take that on at a later point, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely. And no, I think experienced product managers also will ask questions like,
mhm.
does it scale, right? Like, how expensive is it to operate? And with Gen AI particularly, I think some of these new tools that have come out have quickly found out that they can't make money
Yeah.
doing it, right? Because it's so expensive to operate an LLM and to with the training models and so on. So I think experienced product managers will ask those kinds of questions because it's one thing to show a cool prototype that does something that looks really cool. It's another whole thing to
Sure.
productize it, right? So I do think that's where the discipline of product management is still important, even if you might have a few mavericks that come in and say, "Hey, we could do it this way, that way," because especially when you're dealing with the enterprise and big brands, right? There's expectations of stability, there's expectations of scalability, there's expectations of quality. And there's a lot of things that come between just a cool idea or prototype and a product. So product management, the discipline of product management is so incredibly important. So I didn't mean to say product management is just like a bunch of wild ideas being thrown around. Although that's I think a good ingredient to have in
Oh yeah,
any
oh yeah.
any PM
I mean, I
team.
think that's what keeps the innovation alive, right? With Gen AI and so much happening across the industry, the ability to pivot in a relatively less risky way, less expensive way, so that you're able to test enough things and then get into the right space, right? I think that'll be meaningful. No, thank you so much for sharing that. And maybe like the last couple of questions, Daz, like this was super insightful, but I'm also trying to help product managers who might eventually be trying to do their own thing, right? For those folks, like how do you suggest that they keep their entrepreneurial spirit high, and when do they jump in, right? I know like sometimes it's as soon as possible. It's always about the right question. So in your experience, have you had any product managers who have successfully make that jump within the industry? Or like, I mean, I would be curious like what your suggestions for them would be. Yeah.
You mean jump to entrepreneurship or to yeah. Yeah, I mean it's kind of a natural step in the sense that the skill set of a product
Hmm.
manager, ultimately, if you think about it, you know, product, customer, market, all of those things are the ingredients that make for a good founder of a company. They're not all necessary. I mean, obviously, you have founders that are engineers who do quite well, meaning you don't necessarily need to have all of that, but the more of that you have, the more likely you are to, kind of get it right for first time around. My advice would be, and I tell this to product managers anyway, is first of all, talk to customers, right? It's important all the time because I think as a CEO, or the founder of a new startup, that's a skill set you have to have that comfort to just talk to customers all the
Mhm.
time because you're also selling them. And I would say also get comfortable with sales, right? Like, most people, especially come from engineering, are like, I don't want to deal with sales and stuff. Well, your job as a founder, your most important job, arguably over and above the product, is to sell, right? And so if you get exposure as a product manager, in maybe in the safety of a company where the whole company's future doesn't depend on your ability to do it right or wrong. The more exposure you get to sales, and realize how difficult it can be to pitch and persuade and convince, and also how you have to listen carefully to sort of what the customer is looking for, and kind of that skill is invaluable as a founder, right? And when you're a founder for the first time, you don't even you don't know anything if you haven't done it before. So to the extent you were, if I was not a product manager before becoming a founder, so I sort of had to wing it, and I didn't always get it right. I got it wrong a lot of times, but through just trial and error, I kind of figured it out. But to the extent you're going from product
Mhm.
management to being founder, while you're a product manager, learning how sales works, learning why the importance of marketing, ideal customer profile, things that you think are there. Oh, that's marketing. Oh, that's sales. I don't need to deal with that. I think it's important. Those are skills that you will need as a founder. You're going to be the first salesperson. You're going to be the first product manager. So having those skills sooner rather than later will help you,
No, that's
honestly.
really helpful. I mean, I've had the fortune of being on the product marketing side for a few years before coming into product management, and I would be working much more closely with sales back then, and their life was a roller coaster ride. Every day, no matter how good a deal is, it's not closed until it is closed. I think it teaches you patience and perseverance and so much more about like a good product is not the full story. It's the beginning of the story, and it's almost like always important to have like a strong relationship with the person that you're selling to, because end of the day the same product or the same problem could be sold in a couple of different flavors and both of them are more or less similar to each other. At that point it comes down to like how empathetic can you be to the problem that the end user is trying to solve for, and position your product in such a way that okay, it makes the most sense for the person and gives them the trust and confidence to move ahead with your product, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one particular thing
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a learning as a product manager is you don't understand how important user experience, or put another way, eye candy can be to a sale, right? You know, I hate to say that because as a former engineer, and whatever, it's like you realize, oftentimes customers, when they buy,
Yeah.
it's what they see that matters most, right? It's not what they don't see. It's unfortunate because obviously you could have a really cool looking product that doesn't scale and doesn't get the job done. And yet those products do win out. Now, if you have those companies may not make it eventually because you'll disappoint customers and the product won't work and all that. So I'm
Yeah.
not in any way suggesting that you don't you don't worry about all scalability and making sure the product works really well. But there's a tendency to think that things like user experience and things like the visual, design and so on don't matter. That may have been true in the day of the mainframes, or whenever 30 years ago. But today, even enterprise products are expected to look really good. The it has to be, and this is something I preach to our team over and over again. When someone looks at a product, it has to be like it has to look really good. It has to look simple and easy and approachable and so on.
Mm-hmm.
When you're on sales calls and you kind of see the reactions people have, and especially if you lose a deal, you're like, wait, how did we lose a deal to that company? Like they don't have anything. They just have a nice demo. I say, well, you know what? That just shows you how important a nice demo is and a nice UI. So these are things you don't learn as a product manager if all you're doing is collecting requirements and telling the engineers what to build. When you're in sales and when you're on sales calls and stuff, and you think, oh, we're going to win this because we had every single feature they asked for, and then you lose a deal. then you say, oh, wow, how did that happen? And you realize, and I've talked to customers who, you know, sometimes when we do lose deals or I ask them, say, hey, just like, why? And I've had, in one case, the customer said, actually, my boss saw the demo and he just insisted that we buy that product, and I knew wasn't even the right product. And I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying, right? Like, so you sort of when you're in sales, you sort of realize how important that is. And as a product manager, because you can influence, salespeople often cannot influence how the product is designed or built, but a product manager can. So I would say that's an important, just exposure to that environment and learning from
Well,
it is really
yeah.
important.
It I mean, it reminds a lot of what used to happen to us, like when we were in this, like it was a very competitive space when we were when I was a product marketer for an ODBC company, and we were the co-founders of ODBC JDBC, right? So it was just a no-brainer. Like the person who was to be called the father of ODBC was working for us. So like, okay, we knew stuff. But before I joined, for the past 2 years, we were losing consistently with the same company. They're super small compared to size. But then when it came to this very specific point to demos and to going all in on every customer possible, they were like much more hungrier. And they were like a relatively younger company and they were thinking in terms of PLG first. They're like, okay, how do we make the product usable? How do I show them the benefit of the a driver for all we know, which is like the backends of backends? How do we show its value to the end user, right? So they figured that out. But all things but said and done, like it's out there. People are doing it. We can always look at them, learn from them. But it also helps to be grounded in the fact that understanding engineering is only a part of it. Sales is only a part of it. Marketing is only a part of it. Customer support is only a part of it. It's when all of them are cohesively working with each other is when you have like a really strong company coming together, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately,
Mhm.
and you mentioned PLG, right? It's become incredibly important recently, even for enterprise products. People always think, oh, PLGs for consumer products, but even for enterprise products. And I've been thinking about it a lot because I've been thinking, why is it that important now? Like you see products like Figma disrupting Adobe's very, very strong creative tools business, right? You're like, wait a second, Figma doesn't do anything close to what the Adobe tools do. And yet, look at how much market share they've gotten, right? What that tells you, and for a while, is like, why is this happening? And I think it has to do with two things. It's people don't have that much time to invest in learning about a product at the time of sale, right? Like they want something that's easy to use and easy to deploy, and so these products that were designed a couple of generations later focus entirely on user experience. Quick, you can get something done very quickly. You don't have to spend 3 weeks in training to understand how to move, a box from one part of the screen to another, right? Like you just, so the products that were designed that way can often unseat, even very strong incumbents, right? And so I think product design, user experience, product led growth, all of the principles of that, I think are incredibly important going forward because I think customers have very little patience and time and resources to be trained and all of the hurdles you have to get through before you can start using a product. Oftentimes they may settle for something that's does a lot less but
Yeah.
does it quickly and doesn't cost as much, right? And I think we're in that generation now of short attention spans, resource constraints, and quick decisions that have to be made, right? And in that environment, I think product managers have to think very carefully about how to get that instant, view that, hey, this is an easy product to use. Hey, I can use this and I'm not going to struggle with it or have to hire another 10 people to operate the platform. And it's a lot of work, and it goes a little counter to products that are very sophisticated tend to be somewhat more
Mhm.
complex, right? We all know that. And so, yeah, you could build a cool looking product that doesn't really do anything, right? But as a product manager, building a product that does gets a job done but is also very easy to use, is really hard, right? And you see lots of products that are very sophisticated, can do everything, but they're very hard to learn, very hard to use. And you also see products that are super easy to get going with, but you can't get the job done, right? So I think that thought process: how do I make even a sophisticated product approachable, easy to use, and easy to adopt? I think is something that product managers need to think about a lot more now than they did,
It's almost like,
say,
I
10
mean,
years ago.
even within the problem space that you have identified, you should be able to still go after that one problem that most people can empathize with, relate to, but also something that can be easily visually solved for. Like the optics part of it is the fact that they're able to, the UX thing that you were talking about, right? It's the last mile. So you did all the groundwork, but if you're able to make it more visual for the end users to understand how to play around with the product, I think that becomes really powerful because the user may not be not technical. The user's boss may not be not technical, but there'll be some person at some point who's like who's not interested in understanding the low-lying details. They're curious. Okay, how does this look? How efficient is their sales team? How efficient is their supporting? And have they worked with other people like me? Right. So, and that goes a long way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think the bar is much, much higher now for how quickly can I get value out of this product, right? And a lot less patience for products that take forever to learn, that take forever to deploy, require a lot of resources to deploy. And that's a challenge because I mean products that do a lot do require resources, do require training. But how do you kind of make it simple and easy enough that it can be
I know
deployed
it's not like a
quickly?
like for like comparison, but it makes me think of people giving samples of their free food in front of a restaurant, right? Like, I mean, not restaurant, but like a quick serve. There's so many different options. The one that are like giving me the free option, I'm like, okay, I'll taste it. If I like it, I'll go ahead and try the product, right? So,
Well, you're absolutely right. In fact, that's I was just talking to our team the other day about. I said, look, you know what the hardest thing is in sales these days
yeah.
is to get people to try your product. It's like that person in the
Yeah.
grocery store handing stuff out because once people get over that curve and they have that moment of delight. Now, obviously, that's be a good product. If you're handing out something that tastes terrible, no one's going to come back to buy it. But if you have a great product, if you can give them that taste bite that they taste and say, "Oh my God, this is amazing," and then you say, "Hey, wait, I've got like 20 other flavors here. Why don't you walk with me to the aisle and you can pick what you want?" That that's kind of I think the approach that is starting to work better than the you know putting the burden on the customer to go and I mean, if you look at every category of product, there's literally hundreds of them, right? Like I feel for the customer. Like if I were a marketer, or, I'm like, my God, like you took any category, there's many, 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 many different products, and they all, a lot of them look the same, they sound the same. So how do you break through all of that, right? And I think that's why products that uh, reach that moment of delight quickly and are easy to understand and whatever
Yeah.
often
Moment
do
of
win
delight.
out.
That's another topic. But anyway, I want to be respectful of your time. We are at the last 3 minutes of our segment. I want to end this with like something fun. So, outside of adtech, what is the product? Because I know you'll say Jivox if we stick to adtech. I want to know what's your favorite product outside of adtech and why do you like it? It could be software, it could be hardware, it could be anything.
Well, you've just posed my interview question
Oh,
back to
is it
me.
okay?
That's my
Oh, is it
product
okay?
manager
Thanks.
interview question. I say, I have to say, and look, this I'm sure many people would probably say this, but I think the evolution of the iPhone from the early days of the iPod just blows my mind. Of if you talk about a perfect product that was designed, and a lot of things we talked about being easy and approachable and whatever. I think they nailed it totally. And one of the things that I often play back to our team is, and you can go look this up if you haven't already seen it, the first ad for the
Mhm.
iPod. I think you know the pitch line was.
Ah,
10,000
yes, yes, I
songs in your
remember.
pocket.
Yeah.
And if you watch the video, Steve Jobs talking about it, he says he talks all about what happens when you had to go to your friend's house to listen to music together. He said you used to get your little bag and put all your CDs in it and carry it there, and then you're trying to think of which CDs should I take. But, you don't have to worry about that anymore. It's 10,000 songs to sing. I thought it was brilliant, not only from a marketing standpoint, but in terms of how the product was designed to be simple, approachable, and it didn't stop there, right? Obviously, if you look at where the iPhone is now
Yeah.
versus where it was back then, it was a hard drive actually. The very first iPod, it was heavy and it was thick and whatever, but they just stayed true to that principle of simplicity. But it's also a
Mm.
very powerful device. I mean, this thing in its first version or two as a phone had GPS built into it.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. It went from hard drives to SSDs. At that time, the thought of putting SSDs into a little device like that was, how did they do it? Unbreakable glass, like all the things that they did. I can't think of a product that was more perfectly designed and executed than that. Obviously, that's why it's a $1 trillion business. But boy, I have to. Oh, I know if you ask 10 people, maybe nine will say that too. But I'm just so incredibly impressed and inspired by that product that
It's
I
also so
have to always point
counterintuitive
that
to
out.
the way they teach you to think in terms of product, right? They're like MVP, but nope, it's like 10 MVLs, like the things that people will love, all of them getting together at the same time in a very cohesive manner. And it was just like questioning everything that existed until then. It was mind.
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? I'm sure that a lot of people said, "Oh no, you can't put it in such a small device. You can't make unbreakable glass." Oh, wait, what are you talking about? Putting a GPS in a device that tiny? It wasn't. I think it took a lot of leaps of faith by the engineering team and maybe some pushing and shoving. Who knows what was happening behind the scenes? But boy, the results were just unbelievable. And I think even a decade later, it was very, very hard for people to compete with that.
Awesome,
They just
awesome.
got it right.
And for me, I think obviously iPhone has been a big inspiration. I also liked Venmo when it was launched. I don't know if you use Venmo. The part that I really appreciated about it,
This,
it wasn't as technical as iPhone, but it, for me, may, addressed a very important part of human psychology. Like, okay, let's say a couple of friends go to a party and I paid them. The conversation of, oh, you owe me X was a slightly awkward topic. It wasn't completely obvious, right? It's easier at a $200.
right.
What would you do at a $50? What would you do at a $25 thing, right? So what Venmo got right, I think at least in my head, is they made it social. They made it fun. Like by way of adding emoticons at the time of requesting things, they made it a little bit more casual. And the fact that they made it public, made it optional for everyone to see it, I think it was brilliant to be able to think of that inherent human biases and allow them to get above it. And I thought it was just brilliantly done. Eventually, they became a lot more than a sharing uh, app. But when it was just the sharing app, I think I used to love the product.
Yeah, but it also feels like, and I don't know the
Mhm.
underpinnings of the app, obviously, but when you do money transfer tech, boy, you've got to worry about
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
security. You
That's
have to
true.
worry about a lot of things, right? But the important
Exactly.
point is the
Yeah.
user didn't have to worry about it. Like if they made you enter an encryption key and call your friend and say, "Hey, you got to put
Oh,
this
yeah.
encryption key so I can send you money," well, so they said, well, let's hide all that
Absolutely.
sophisticated tech underneath, right? So the user doesn't have to worry about it. You just push a button and boom, your money shows up somewhere. Obviously, there's a lot of tech underneath it. I don't know how much tech is or how complicated that is, but I would bet you there's a lot of stuff that happens there. But for the
Exactly.
user, to your point, it was a simple app. Like the percent, it's easy, it just works, right? And I think products like that, are what impress me. It's hard to do, trust me. It's like, I think almost a more than a passion, almost an obsession with building a product that's easy to use and yet very sophisticated and gets the job done. Not
Need a
easy, but
maniac on both the ends.
definitely
A
a
maniac
recipe
who
for
can
success.
focus on the technical problem, but also who understands the usability of the product in every sense, right? So